Hello quilt friends, welcome back to the Aster Sew Along. We are in week 2 where we are making our Aster quilt, which you see behind me. So last week when we got together we did all the cutting for the quilt, which is quite a bit. I guess you didn't need to worry about the sashing and the borders and the binding, but we did the cutting of our colored prints and our background. We also made a whole bunch of these little half square triangles here. So that was a lot for our first week, and if you didn't get it all done, I don't want you to feel bad. You can go at your own pace, but I just wanted to share a couple suggestions for you if you feel like each week the assignment or the workload is a little too heavy. If you want to, you could just make enough for one block each week according to the instructions, and that way you learn along with us, but you don't feel pressure to get all of the blocks done. The other thing is we're going to be meeting for a few weeks, I think 3, and then we have a break for the holidays, so you'll be able to do quite a bit of catch up over the holidays. And then also another example, next week for step 3, we're just doing some folded corners, so our workload isn't that heavy that week too, so you will have a few chances to get caught up if you are falling a little bit behind. So don't worry too much about that part. For this week we are going to make this little block right here, and then we are going to sew it together with these pieces here to make this block. So right there, that's going to be our assignment for this week. So stay tuned. I've got 3 or 4 instructional videos that'll be coming up next, where I will walk you through all the parts of step 2. So if at any point you have any questions, make sure to leave them in the comments for me, and I will stop back or check back periodically and make sure to answer any of those for you. So stay tuned and follow along. So it is a gloomy day here in Minnesota as I work on the demo blocks for this, so our lighting is kind of dark. I've put a couple extra lights on, but I wish it was daylight so you can see the prettiness of the colors and things, but hopefully with the extra lamps that I have, you can see my little hot light here, that you can at least see well enough to see what I'm doing in my demo. So we're going to start by gathering all the half square triangles that we made in step 1. Then you're going to grab the matching square of the same size, 1 5/8, and the background square. Then we're going to sew them together into a little 4 patch like this. So you're going to take these 2 pieces and join here, take these 2 pieces and join here. Then for the pressing, you're going to press towards these background squares so that your seams are going in opposite direction, and this little center seam will nest. And then after that, you can sew this way, and that will complete your little 4 patch block. So then you're going to make 4 of those, that's pretty obvious by the pieces that you'll have laying here, but you're going to make 4 blocks that look just like that. So let's talk a little bit about the nesting process for when we sew our little block together here. So you're going to lay them right sides together, and I'm just going to get it started on the machine. So I get it lined up and take a few stitches, and then to do the nesting I always put one finger underneath to kind of pull this a little bit tight, and I put this finger on top and I feel for if those seams are butted up next to each other. Now if they're not quite perfect, then you can use the bottom finger to apply a little pressure to pull it into place so that it does lock up, and then I leave my top finger right there pressed over that seam as I sew towards it, so that finger acts as a pin, and then I pull it out of the way before I sew over it. Then after you get that intersection lined up, then I look to the next spot and continue to sew down. And I'll do that one more time so you can watch me again. Get those pieces lined up, start sewing, then stop and put a finger underneath and a finger on top. Feel for if they are nested or not, and by nested I mean that those seams are right up next to each other. I don't feel a gap in between. I use my bottom finger to apply a little pressure and the top finger to sort of pin it in place. I'm not stretching as I'm sewing, but I'm just applying enough pressure to keep the seams locked together. Now I find that nesting is way faster than pinning, so that's why I do it that way. Pinning just really slows me down, and sometimes the bulk of the pin can actually make things off a little bit, and I have very good luck with getting my seams nested just by using that technique. So here's the block when we're done. The proof size should be 2 3/4, so you want to make sure that you've got your block that size, and then you can see I've got 1/4 inch beyond the points here. And then one thing I want to comment on is the pressing on this block. So the pressing arrow that I show in the pattern is, actually this is how the direction that it is in the pattern. The pressing arrow points this way, so towards this side of the block. And there's a couple reasons why I have you do that. First of all, I analyze where the least amount of bulk is, and that's on this side. And then also, I'm looking at this little intersection here. So if I had pressed it this way, you can see that, let's see if I can hold it so the camera can see. You can see that I can't tell where that tip of that point is, and I might accidentally sew over the top of it. If I press this way, then I can see it when I'm sewing that next seam together. There you go. Now you can kind of see in the camera. That's what I'm looking at right there. I want to make sure that that's visible so I can see what I'm doing. So those are my two considerations when it comes to pressing. So after you make a couple of them and see that they're the right size and things are turning out, then you can go ahead and make all your color combinations of that little block. And then you'll have 4 of each color. Let's move on to the second part of step 2, and that involves making a bunch of this block right here. Now, if you remember early on, we went through and made our color combinations. So you can see here that I've set out all of my blocks like this, and then I had taken a picture of those color combinations I had come up with, and I've used that picture to refer back to so that I remember which color goes with what. So we're going to find all of our 2 3/4 inch squares, and we're going to make all of those pairings so that you can make 4 blocks of each color combination. And now we're just going to sew them together like we did the first part of the step. It's kind of a minute or a little bit bigger version of this block. It's very simple to do, so use those same techniques that we talked about earlier. One thing I do want to point out is if you are using directional prints, like this one in particular, I'm a little bit of a stickler about, I want those going the same direction in the block. So if you need to, you can do like I did and lay them out like this so that you can see where they're going. The other option you can do, because this is basically the same as this block and this is the same as this block, you can make 2 like this and 2 like this, and you'll have yourself covered for those directional combinations. Now, I didn't pay any attention to the background print. I want that to look really random. Even though there are words in it and it has maybe a little bit of a direction, I'm going to place those totally randomly throughout the quilt. It's just some of these feature pieces that I think when the block is done, it will be obvious. So here's what that block is going to look like when it's finished. So we're putting these pieces in here. So if there are anything that is directional, I'm going to make sure that I have those going the right direction so that in the finished block, you know, that's going to draw your eye. So you really want to make sure that those are going in the right direction. So you can head back to your machine. You're going to sew those blocks together, and then I'll be back to talk about that finished block. One more quick thought that I thought I'd share with you, and that's how I get this block to the machine with the pieces in the right direction. So what I'm going to do is flip these right sides together, and I'm going to sew here. I'm going to do the same here, and I'm just going to line them up along the line that needs to be sewn together. So we're sewing again this middle seam here, and again that's just getting lined up here. Then I will bring this to the machine and I'll take each piece off the pile in the order that they're laid out and always sew along this right side right here. So I've gone ahead and I've sewed these blocks together and I've done the pressing. You can follow the arrows again in the pattern for the pressing. It's basically the same as when you made this little block. So you probably got that pressing down pat. Then the next thing you want to do is make sure that those blocks measure 5 inches. So again, I take my clear acrylic ruler and lay it on top and make sure we've got that 5 inches. Now, if you've been sewing accurately, hopefully you won't have too many issues with that. And like for me, I know I can see my block is 5 inches. I've measured all of them and they're all really close. So I probably don't have to measure all of them. But if you're a little bit off, you might need to make some adjustments in your seam allowance or your pressing or something to make sure that you're staying at that 5 inches. And part of the reason why that's important is because when you sew your block together, if this isn't 5 inches, it's not going to meet up with the length of this unit right here. And then you're also going to have a hard time getting that seam and this seam lined up. So accuracy is pretty important in this block. So just take care when you're sewing those together so that you stay accurate. And once you've done one set of blocks, then you can go through and take all those matchings or pairings that you had from earlier and sew them all together to complete 4 of each color combination. So that's all we've got for this week, and hope to see you back here again next week for some more sewing. We'll be moving on to step 3. So see you next week.